Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that may have been made for film or television. Today, we're moving along in the Night Shift movie vlog, and we have finally gotten to probably the most famous movie that came out of this collection, Children of the Corn. Children of the Corn was initially published in a 1977 issue of Penthouse before being put in the 1978 omnibus Night Shift. And then in 1985, of course, it was turned into a movie that then spawned an entire franchise, including one prequel that was made for television, but we're getting another prequel that's due to come out this year. At least they slated it for 2022, but it doesn't have an official release date yet. I haven't been able to find much about that production other than it's supposed to be happening. But today, we're going to be looking at the 1985 original Children of the Corn that spawned all of that, and then we're going to be going through all of the other Children of the Corn on Patreon for those watch-alongs. So if you don't want to miss those, click that link down below, support the channel, get those watch-alongs. Children of the Corn was directed by Fritz Kirsch, starring Linda Hamilton, of course, of Terminator fame, and Peter Horton. He was a principal player on that show 30-something. For my fellow Trekkies, it turns out there actually is a Star Trek connection here. The actor who plays Isaac, John Franklin, in the Voyager episode Critical Care, you know, where the doctors holler? The doctor's hollow emitter gets stolen. He has a bit part in that episode. So have fun, my Trekkies. Courtney Gaines plays Malachi. There are stories that his parents were afraid of him, and apparently the way he got the role was by using a prop knife to hold one of the casting assistants hostage at his audition. So that tells you something about the role of Malachi. Is that it? Is that anything else? Is there anything else I wanted to tell you? Originally, there was a screenplay written by Stephen King, but the first 35 pages was the argument that takes place between Bert and Vicky in the car that sets up their relationship. And even knowing the short story, if we were fleshing this out to an hour-and-a-half, 2-hour movie, I think 35 pages may have been just a little long, and the producers felt the same. So they had somebody else write the screenplay, and that's the one that they went with. And here we go. Oh, I totally forgot to give you a synopsis. I just kind of figured that everyone knows Children of the Corn by now, at least in reputation. Let's also go ahead and say spoilers for all things, obviously, movie of Children of the Corn, and spoilers for all things short story, because I will be lining up the adaptation to the source material, seeing how they compare. The basic premise is that Bert and Vicky are on a road trip across the country. They're heading out to California. The goal of this road trip is to actually save their marriage. They are bickering. They are not a happy couple. Suddenly, while they're arguing in the car, Bert turns to look at her. It's even mentioned in the short story, the one time I took my eyes off the road to look at her. Vicky, I'm gonna yell at you. Boom, boom. They run over something. Turns out it was a boy. But when they go back to the body, the throat had been slit and he had been pushed from out of the rows of corn as they drive through Nebraska. They get into this small town that is completely deserted except for a bunch of children, and the town is Gatlin, which is a town over next door to, if you will, the town that Mother Abigail lives in The Stand. So we're getting some of our Stephen King extended universe connections and important locations here. So they get into town. It's completely deserted. As Bert walks into the church, which looks like the only thing that is not run down, not covered in dust. It's actually pristine. It's cared for except for the letters that have been taken off of the sign out front that when Bert rearranges them spell Gatlin Grace Baptist Church, or just Grace Baptist Church, I think. They're collecting dust in the corner in a pile, and the Jesus on the cross is kind of grotesque with corn husks in its mouth and its eyes, and they had found a little cross fashioned out of corn husks and silk in the boy's suitcase that they run over. So what the hell happens? Where did the boy come from? Why are the children in this town alone without any parents? And why has Jesus been defiled by corn? Those are the questions, and now we're really going to start watching this thing. I like the music that's starting this. It's definitely setting the proper tone. You can find a lot of articles and videos about not knowing what happened to the adults is the biggest plot hole in this movie, and also the short story. I would argue that in the short story, it really doesn't matter. That's not the point of it. We're picking up in this town at a point where the adults are gone, and our confusion mirrors our protagonist. So it's really interesting that we're getting this scene from 3 years earlier now. I haven't seen this movie in so long, I forgot this scene even existed. This step by step, we're going to show up in the window. We're gonna close the door. We're gonna lock the door. Poison the coffee, which I'm guessing she didn't sugar the coffee right away. It builds so successfully. So now I'm really confused about these articles I'm reading saying that there's a plot hole, because we're watching it happen. It is valid to say that there's a plot hole of why in 3 years has no one discovered this town. So I guess that's the plot hole, not that the parents are dead. I have to say, I love 80s horror films because what you don't see is so much scarier than what you do. Because of the lack of proficiency in these special effects or the CGI, using dummies rather than real people and then putting computer graphics in there, they got creative. And we saw, you know, the scythe slice and blood fly, but we didn't see the actual massacre. And it's so much more frightening. So the scythes. Oh, the scythe. I wore my kitty cat with a scythe t-shirt for this movie today. Because I have kitty cats, and it's a scythe. Linda Hamilton said that this is the one movie of her entire career she regrets doing. I don't know why. It's a cult classic. It's so famous.
Happy birthday.
It's not his birthday in the short story, but I kind of like that idea as a reason for traveling, because they seem to be getting along rather than fighting. That's one big difference. Okay, maybe this little, like, fake twist that she's doing is why she's embarrassed by this movie. Just saying. Do you notice night shift? I'm pointing right to it on my screen as if you can see, and it's nowhere near in the frame of my shot. There is the paperback of the Night Shift short story collection, and that's the picture on it is from I Am the Doorway, which was the second story, and you can check out that movie vlog here. I found a pretty okay short film of it on YouTube that you can watch.
He said he couldn't take it anymore.
Okay, so the kids are already talking about running away. At the beginning of the short story, I guess that's appropriate because we are to surmise that this kid was killed because he was trying to get away. It's never stated explicitly, and it's not until the very end of the short story they're starting to think maybe I don't like Isaac as much as some of these other people. She also hasn't grown in 3 years. Kids grow fast. You should have gotten 2 actresses for that. Maybe they will if you keep shouting, little girl. In the short story, Vicky comes from an upbringing of her parents were religious zealots, and they would go to these, you know, tent revival meetings. When Bert says, didn't the preacher on that radio station sound a little young later on in the short story, she comes back at him going, no, that's perfectly normal. There was a child, you know, a little girl who was a faith healer that I saw who was maybe 6. And she turns off the radio forcefully saying, I got out of it. I don't want to hear this shit. She's not laughing at the radio and making fun of it. So we're changing their relationship and their character, changing the relationship dynamic and changing Vicky's character quite a bit.
No room for commitment.
Amen. She meant that. Did you note that? The lack of score while we were in the car, and now we suddenly get this almost hopeful. There's these major chords, like this hopeful music for this kid, but there's also the steady beat underneath it that's driving a tension, a danger. And then the kid's chorus from the opening sequence comes back in. I love this score. He's not supposed to take his eyes off the road for the map. It's supposed to be because he's yelling at his wife, who is annoying the out of him, saying, turn around, turn around, turn around, oh my god, where are you, where are you, where are you? The character really is written in a very annoying way. We side with Bert in the short story. You know, I wonder if it was the length of the fight that the producers objected to in Stephen King's version of the script, or if it was the relationship, the bickering, the marriage at its end that the producer objected to. Stephen King, if you're listening and you still have that 35-page fight, I kind of want to read it. Send it on over. So there's a little bit of a consistency and continuity issue here. Was Malachi actually walking up to the car? Or was that all part of her dream? If he did walk up to the car, there's so much space between where the car was on the road, they had to go over the ditch, and then the corn started. Bert would have seen something. Who wants to play Monopoly? I haven't played forever. Come on over. That'll be fun. So all of this is embellishment. This doesn't exist in the short story. This is to give us a feel for the town. We do lose something, I think, in knowing what Bert and Vicky are heading toward, rather than discovering it with them, but it does build the suspense of what's going to happen when they get there. I don't know which is scarier, right? The suspense of not knowing, or the suspense of going, oh,
Go to the old man.
even the creepy
Make sure he
voice.
tells them nothing.
Oh. Who is this fucking adult that shouldn't exist in this story in any which way? Right, note the lack of music for the wind coming in.
What you want to do?
The sound is done really well. Wait, why are the clouds not moving anymore in the background? Continuity! Continuity department.
The Lord did come to me, and he was a shape. It was he who walks behind the rose.
He says all this at the end of the short story, saying, I saw it before it happened. So at the end of the short story, as Bert is running from these children, kind of feeling bad, but also not really, about leaving his wife to their mercy, he's running through the corn. He thinks he's lost them. He comes out on this clearing, and he sees the two crosses, and one of them is a blue uniform, and the other one is the cassock of a priest. And this conversation with the other kids happens at the end of the short story. So this is what riles them up to go chasing after Vicky and Bert. We don't see any of this in the short story, but I don't mind fleshing it out, except that it was the conversation that happens at the end. What did the kids do with all the bodies? Doesn't happen in the short story, but I wonder if they put that in as a nod to Graveyard Shift from the Night Shift collection. Okay, so now the kids are looting the car. What actually happens in the short story is they go into a diner, they get back in the car, they go looking for the constable across the town square, they see the church and they stop, and Vicky's like, Bert, I'm just going to take my keys, they're in my purse, and I'm going to leave you. Because, of course, they're fighting. He dumps the purse upside down, he takes the keys from her, and he goes into the church. There's a whole exploration that happens in the church that I'm not going to get into here because I'm hoping it's going to happen, because it should reveal a lot to us, although we don't really need that setup because we know there's something religious with the way that this has already been set up, so we might not get the church. But when he comes back out, they're attacking the car and Vicky has locked herself inside. When they see him, Malachi comes running. He actually gets stabbed in the arm, Bert does, and takes the knife, kills the kid. We're skipping all of that, I guess. If we don't have them arguing, he can't have the moment of taking her keys, so she can't strand him there. And then he doesn't leave her, which separates them for the kids to attack. And then he goes running into the corn while the kids chase him. And he leaves Vicky in the car and wonders later, I probably shouldn't have left her there, but I don't really feel so bad about it. I wonder what happened to her. So this discovery is all sorts of different. I walk along, I wonder what went wrong. So at the end of the short story, the seer says, God is displeased, he who walks behind the rose. The age now is no longer 19, it's 18. And some people who are already 18 walk out into the rose to be sacrificed. And it leaves behind a 17-year-old who is pregnant with one of their children. And she's the one that doesn't think this is such a good idea to be following Isaac anymore. I think her name was Rebecca. So here we get the church. I wonder if he's going to find the book that has all of their birthdays, their names that were changed from whatever they were given at birth to something very Old Testament like Malachi or Isaac in parentheses, and then their death date and how it's always on exactly their 19th birthday. But I guess he's going to walk on from the church and we're not going to learn any of that. And instead of being trapped in the car with the kids, she's going to be in the house. I don't mind that so much. Like, I think to the spirit of the story, that part's still the same. I love the montage of cutting to all the different ways they're getting into the house. So we know not only is the house surrounded, but they're going to be coming at her from all directions within the house. Such a great setup. How did this corn get everywhere? It looks like they just took corn, put it on a counter, and then let it dry out. Unless the fields encroach and grow into the building, it makes no sense. Continuity. I mean, it looks really cool. It just doesn't make sense.
What do you want?
We just saw them all coming in from like a window, a door, all over the house, but now here they are all congregated at one place. The continuity, the consistency just is lost in this whole movie. There's a Shining moment. I like that they're giving homage to other King work. We just saw that in Cat's Eye too, although I think Cat's Eye was a little more on the nose and deliberate about it. Oh, that's so creepy. How do you know where to go? You don't know where the f that clearing is. Vicky! Maybe ask her, where is this place that you're drawing? And the corn opens up for him. So in the short story, the corn is planted in impossibly neat, perfect rows that he can run through. He runs through it to get away from them after the kids attack Vicky in the car. Here he's going to save her. I guess 80s family values. Why would you be in a couple unless you were ready to die for your partner? Rather than a couple that was on the rocks about to get a divorce on a road trip trying to save their marriage. It really happens, and it happened in the 80s too. Okay, so we get the names written in blood. So this is a great way to introduce us to this concept. Instead of focusing the camera on the Bible with the birth and death dates in it for us to sit there and read. It's an audiovisual medium. I actually really like this way of introducing the concept to us. And it happens so late in the movie, we're 2/3 of the way through, that it's still a surprise. Okay, so now this is going to be the short story where they chase him and he loses them in the corn. Wait, where'd all the children go? There was one that was literally like a foot behind you and now they're all just gone. Oh, there they are. Around the building. Continuity. He's so over the top, but also perfectly cast.
But when he was young, he was a preacher, so everybody believed him. They thought he had a great spirit. I thought it was weird. Huh, Sarah?
So without the preface of the child preacher that Vicky comments on the radio trying to say, no, Bert, kid preachers and faith healers exist, they cut out the piece of the short story that would have set it up a little better.
Seize him, punish him, cut him down, I command you.
You know who he reminds me of is, have you seen the movie Legend, the Goblin's voice? Higher, burning fire, making music like a choir. He's way older than 19.
What clearing? Where?
In the cornfield.
Did he just say where without his mouth moving? The short story doesn't couple this ending with one of their 19th birthdays, but I think it's a great homage to lowering the age that happens at the end, and a great way to show us what happens on their 19th birthday, which is something Bert just kind of pieces together. Oh, 80s effects. It actually looks very similar to what happened, 6-7 years later in The Lawnmower Man, that weird bubble fire effect. Why did none of the other children try to stop her? Continuity. Well, that's more consistency than continuity. Character consistency. Direction. At least we have one hand fighting because of his injury. That's something consistent, I guess. So I guess now Malachi is back and has the spirit of he who walks behind the rose. Wait, so now they're just trusting all of these kids that we're just trying to kill them? I guess all of the kids were swayed? It's not like they listened to their parents, they killed them. You know, I'm starting to think that Linda Hamilton wasn't embarrassed by this movie in her career, but by her performance in this movie. Because she has some really great moments as an actress, and then she just has this, I can't believe I'm making this f***ing film face during a tape. And the corn is going to actually attack him. Because this has been set up in any way how in the previous hour and 20 minutes of this movie. You know, it's corn. You probably didn't need the gasoline, you just needed to light it on fire. One stalk would catch on another, you know. A Malachi cocktail. There's gasoline being sprinkled onto the ground. It would have caught fire even if it didn't hit the corn. Jesus Christ. Logic department. Logic. Consistency. Direction. Editing. The music is great. The music is building the suspense, but I'm so already over the kind of, you've already done things that would have ended this feeling. Oh look, the two of them are alive and happy when they were supposed to be fighting for the entire time and dead at the end.
How about a month?
So he just nonchalantly and happily agreed to basically adopt 2 children while he's stressing about starting a new job fresh out of medical school. Something doesn't seem right there. Nice. I love when we always have this kind of last hook ending. It was done really well in Carrie, if you remember. Oh, that's it. Just the end. Suddenly there's no score? Just the crickets? The score was the strongest part of this whole... There it is. Say it's strongest part of this whole movie, so why are we not getting it? So let's take a minute and forget about the short story source material that this is based on. Let's just talk about this as a movie. Performances, I think, are fairly solid. They weren't great. They weren't bad. Isaac and Malachi, I think, were they were a little over the top performances, a little hammy, but I think it fit because they were child characters fending for themselves with this fanatical belief. So I think it really worked. As for Linda Hamilton and Peter Horton, I think that they gave passable performances. It was decent. There were a few moments where you saw that Linda Hamilton was kind of overshooting this movie. And I think Peter Horton did his best to make sense of a character that sometimes didn't behave the way that you would expect, especially right there at the end with the children. So performances, neither good nor bad. They were what they were. I think that the consistency and the continuity of this was all over the place. I have a great suspension of disbelief when I watch horror movies, but I still have to believe that within the world, what I'm seeing makes sense. And a lot of it didn't, like when the kids went into that house from all different directions, and then suddenly we're all in one place at the front door. Right? The sound dubbing was a little bit of a problem. I feel like they realized that they had to get into a studio and dub some of these lines over, and they either didn't quite match what was originally filmed, or they added dialogue and they didn't bother to cut away from the person whose mouth wasn't moving. So I have a lot of technical issues when it comes to the editing and the sound there, although the score is so strong. I love the child's voices in this kind of monk chanting, right? It feels very religious, very church-like, very reverent. And the score did so much to set tone and to create suspense, much more so than a lot of the rest of this movie did, when you hope all elements will work together. I do think that the opening was strong. We got this sense of danger, this impending doom, but about halfway, 2/3 of the way through the movie, it kind of plateaued, and it was like, all right, so are we just going to sit at this level, or are we going to ramp it up a notch again? I do think that the production value was great. I enjoy this movie. I do think it's really fun, in spite of its problems. And that goes a long way with me. So I'm going to say, out of 5 stars, we're going to put this right in the middle. We're going to give Children of the Corn, not based on the source material, as a movie on its own, 2.5 stars. Now let's talk about the adaptation. The characterizations are all wrong for Bert and Vicky. Their relationship is all wrong. They're supposed to be fighting and at odds right from the beginning. The way that they discover the town, we know what's coming rather than discovering it with them, which I think is so much more scary when it comes to the short story. But translating for an audiovisual medium and kind of giving us this sense of what's happening in Gatlin as they're approaching it, I think works. I do not like the opening showing all of the adults being killed. That doesn't exist in the short story. I think it's much more powerful and intriguing if we just know the adults are gone and don't know why. I think that takes something away from the mystery and the suspense and the question, especially since we know this turned into a franchise where they can answer that in another movie. It's not important to this story. Although I do appreciate the conciseness of giving us a complete story with that. We understand how it happened and why it happened. We just don't understand, like the short story, why no one has discovered this town of children and come to do something about it. The tone for most of the movie, I think, was appropriate. It matched the short story outside of the characterizations of our main characters. So that says a lot as well. Okay. I do think that at its heart, It honored the short story. I do. But I think it took so much license when it came to embellishing and fleshing out the story to make it a full-length movie that didn't need to happen. They could have kept the short story as it was. Maybe Stephen King's original 35 pages of the fight was a better option. I don't know. I would have to read them. King, you hear me? Send over a copy. I'll give you some feedback. Maybe we'll remake Children of the Corn. I'd love to play Bert, except I think I'm a little too old. Doesn't matter. We have de-aging CGI now. I'll do it. All right, so let's just get to the rating. As an adaptation, I'm going to give Children of the Corn 2 stars out of 5. All right, guys, that was it. That was the watch along over on Patreon and the movie vlog over on YouTube for Children of the Corn. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything else coming up. After we finish all the night shift movie vlogs, we're moving on to the long walk and then the dead zone. It's a very little thing from you to hit those buttons and a really big thing that helps out the channel a lot. If you want to follow me on social media, see pictures of the cats, the hamsters, support the channel through Patreon, all of those links are down below in the description. I will see you guys next time.